A few months ago, I received an unexpected call from a longtime friend. He's a senior minister at one of the largest Unity churches in the country. And he's been a valued mentor for me for years, one of my go-to people when I need help or advice. But this time he was calling me for support. He told me that in the aftermath of COVID, the attendance and the financial giving at his church had dropped by more than half. And it had caused him to really begin doubting himself. And my dear, wonderful friend, this incredibly gifted minister, said that he felt like a failure, that he felt like a fraud. I found this absolutely astonishing because it could not be further from the truth. And I told him so. But it reminded me that anyone, even the most accomplished people, can suffer from a bout of what is called imposter syndrome. How many of you have heard of imposter syndrome? Oh, a few of you. So imposter syndrome is when someone thinks that they are not as good or smart or capable as people think they are, or perhaps as they should be, and that sooner or later, someone's going to find out. So psychologists tell us that more than 70% of us will have an episode of imposter syndrome at some point in our lives. Because it happens, it occurs across all cultures, backgrounds, genders, occupations. It happens to artists, to authors, to musicians, to ministers, to business people, to leaders, even to brain surgeons. That is not a comforting thought, is it? The idea that a brain surgeon would feel like a fraud. Fortunately, a person's experience of imposter syndrome has absolutely nothing to do with their level of skill or ability, as was true for my minister friend. And that actually quite often these folks who have a case of imposter syndrome or an episode of it are really great at what they do. They just haven't internalized that. Right? They don't necessarily see it in themselves, even if others are seeing it in them. In her book, The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women, Valerie Young writes, despite often overwhelming evidence of their abilities, imposters dismiss them as merely a matter of luck, timing, outside help, charm, even computer error. Have you ever done that? Have you ever tossed off a compliment? Oh, I was just lucky. You know what that's like. But really, some of the most unlikely people sometimes feel like imposters. Lady Gaga says this, I still sometimes feel like a loser kid in high school, and I just have to pick myself up and tell myself that I'm a superstar every morning so that I can get through this day and be for my fans what they need me to be. That's something, isn't it? The late great poet and author Maya Angelou said, I have written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody, and they're going to find me out. That's amazing, isn't it? I think imposter syndrome is so widespread because so many of us have this idea, this belief that somehow, in some way, we're not good enough. We're not successful enough. We're not creative enough, attractive enough, spiritual enough, tough enough, smart enough, and on and on. Where do we get these incredibly destructive beliefs? Well, often we get them from someone whose opinion matters a lot to us. It could be a parent, a teacher, coach, mentor, supervisor, or another authority figure. Here are what some famous people were told by others who were close to them. Beethoven's teacher called him hopeless. As his teacher called him hopeless. What kind of a teacher is that? As a composer. Walt Disney was fired by a newspaper editor for his quote-unquote lack of ideas. Albert Einstein's teacher said he was, quote, mentally slow, unsociable, and adrift forever in his foolish dreams. Albert Einstein. Heisman Trophy winner and NFL running back Herschel Walker was told by his junior high coach that he was too small and he should go out for track instead. This one's great. After his first screen test, Fred Astaire received a memo from the MGM testing director that said, "Can't act, slightly bald, can dance a little." And Rodin's father said of the great, amazing sculptor Rodin, "I have an idiot for a son." And finally, the manager of the Grand Ole Opry fired Elvis Presley after his first performance and told him, "You ain't going nowhere, son. You ought to go back to driving a truck." Thank goodness these amazing people didn't let the random offhand comments of a few people hold them back. Look what the world would have lost. Oh my gosh. Because the problem isn't when someone labels or limits us or makes an offhand comment. The problem is when we believe them. So I grew up with a mother who loved me unconditionally and a father who didn't. My mom believed in me, and she taught me that I could do anything that I set my mind to. She loved me no matter what. My father, on the other hand, was very smart, often very, very funny. But my dad really didn't know how to love. I say that because more often than not, he was either unavailable or critical of me. And so I came to the conclusion that I wasn't good enough for my dad. But if I kept trying, maybe someday I would be, and I would win his love. And so I tried very, very hard on all fronts. But it seemed like the goalposts just kept moving. In 2005, at the end of my father's life, I flew to Florida to be with him, and he had become very thin and bony. He was barely eating. He was ready to die. But I really wanted those last times with him to be meaningful. And so I sat with him, and we reminisced, and we looked at old photos. I listened to all of his stories. I remember rubbing his neck and his shoulders and just feeling how bony they were. And I tried to keep him as comfortable as I could. And then one day, the ambulance came to take my father to the residential hospice facility. They have those in Florida. They're pretty amazing. And as they were loading my father into the back, and I was preparing to get into the back of the ambulance with him, he suddenly looked at me and said, "You are a wonderful girl." Right? So my first thought was, well, there it is. Right? There's what I have waited to hear my entire life. And the second thought I had was, oh my goodness, I waited my entire life to hear that. What a waste of my time and my energy, right? Trying to win his love when it turns out I already had it. To win his approval, and it turned out I already had it. All the ways in which I tried to prove myself and be enough for him. What a waste. And then I realized not only that, but how often I had projected my father onto other people, like bosses and CEOs, and even some boyfriends. Not you. Even some boyfriends. And then I would repeat the whole story, right? Because they were people who were withholding love. And so I would have this idea that they think I'm not good enough. And so I must try harder, or turn myself inside out to do that. You know what I realized with my father? Thank goodness. He's a human being. He was a human being just like me. He had his own history. He had his own shortcomings. His inability to express love had nothing to do with me. And after that episode with him where he expressed his feelings towards me, I said to myself, never again. Never again will I doubt my own worth or turn myself inside out to try to meet what I imagine to be somebody else's standards out there, because I am enough. As I am, as are you, as are you. I share this story with you today because that feeling of being inadequate, of not being able to receive the love we want, of feeling insufficient is so painful. And I don't want you to be in pain. I don't want that for you. You know, we all have, I think, this critical voice in our heads, right? Sort of saying things we wish we didn't have to listen to. It could be an outdated tape of something that was said in the past by a parent, a teacher, a mentor, a partner, whoever it might be. Sometimes, unfortunately, we have a negative tape playing in our head because we have internalized traditional Christian dogma that says we're all miserable sinners in need of saving. Deeply internalized, one can never feel completely good about themselves. If you are one of those people who's had that experience in traditional religion, traditional Christianity, I would encourage you to pay more attention to what Jesus taught than what the traditional church codified. Because Jesus never told people they were not enough. He never saw them as not enough. He made it clear that people from all walks of life were already whole and worthy and loved. You are the light of the world, he said. And he meant all of us when he said it. As if to say, you are not just enough, you are more than enough. As we say in unity, you are the very self-livingness of God. You are God in expression. And God is not here to judge and punish you. God is here to love and encourage you. God is all for you. Amen. Pulling for you. To deeply know that can be a very healing process, but what does it take? What does it take for us to truly believe that we're enough to quiet the voice of the internal critic or whatever is telling us we're an imposter, or we're a failure, or we're a fraud? What does it take? Well, I used to believe that the only voice, really, in my head that could outweigh my father's voice was that of a highly trained therapist. I'm not kidding. You get a relationship with a therapist and you trust them and they will tell you the truth, and suddenly it just cuts through all the you know what. A therapist can be a life changer. But I've come to see more recently that there is yet another voice that is even more accessible to us, that can set us free. And it costs absolutely nothing. It's the voice of God within us. It's the voice of God within us. You see, through prayer and meditation, through contemplation, through time in the silence, you can connect with this spiritual essence, this divine presence, whether you call it God or Jesus or divine mind or infinite intelligence, whatever it is, your higher power, whatever it is, you can connect with it. And it will soothe your hurts. And it will fuel your dreams. And it will love you like you've never felt love before, just pouring through you. Because this divine presence knows who you truly are. Amen. This divine presence is who you truly are. And it is all love, and it is all grace, and it is all beauty and peace. If you seek this presence within you, earnestly seek it. It may take some time, but if you seek this presence within you, you will find it. Seek, and you will find. And when you do, you will have discovered the greatest love, the greatest acceptance, the greatest reassurance, the greatest sense of being protected and cared for and cheered on that you could ever imagine. So there's an exercise I'd like to use. This has been pretty remarkable in my life, so I'm going to offer it to you, and you may have done this already. But it's a way to sort of connect with that, your own inner voice, kind of like what Boyd was singing earlier, right? The voice within you that says you're the way of God. You're not weak. You're strong, etc. You sit down, create a little quiet space for yourself, and you start by writing a letter to God. To God, Jesus, infinite mind. You pick whatever works for you. And in that letter, hold forth, let it come. Whatever you're feeling, whatever doubts you're having about yourself, whatever insecurities you have, whatever questions you have, put them out there. Just put them out there. Write it all down. You're not going to show this to anybody. This is for you. And then wait. Just sit for a little bit and wait. And then write a letter to you from God. Dear Penny, dear Richard, dear Lisa, right? Love God. Open yourself up to whatever flows through you, whatever higher wisdom wants to speak to you. And you may just be amazed at what comes pouring out on the page, your own innate wisdom that you forgot you had. And all of a sudden you're thinking, where did that come from? That's just what I most needed to hear. It's a beautiful way to reconnect with the truth of who you are. There's a wonderful quote from, I gotta see her name to remember it, Macrina Viderker, who said, "Oh God, help me believe the truth about myself, no matter how beautiful it is." So here's the beautiful truth. You are each in your own exquisite way, a unique expression of God. You are more than capable enough. You are more than beautiful enough. You are more than talented enough. You are more than loved enough to go out and live a glorious, fulfilling life. It is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom because you deserve it. Let's turn now to our meditation. Thank you. I'm going to own that. All right, let's take a moment to turn within. Take a nice big deep breath in. Release and let it go. Just feel a good Mother Earth beneath your feet. Just feel beautiful sacred energy enfolding you and comforting you, loving you, pulling for you. Just breathing in, feel yourself begin to relax and let go. Let go and let go. I invite you in this meditation to open the way for a connection with divine love. Perhaps there is something weighing on your heart. Perhaps you have a question about your future. Perhaps you are just simply needing a sense of reassurance. Breathe into the spaciousness of the presence of God within you. And if you have a question or a concern, Speak it to that higher presence within you in the silence. And listen for your answer. Returning now from this time of communion with the inner presence that is the truth of us. We remember that we can do this at any time. When the voices in our head are causing us pain, we can return to the love of God within us and find peace. We practice it over and over and over again. And for this truth and for this empowering understanding, for this knowing that we can release our burdens, stand tall and free, we say thank you, God. And so it is. Amen.
Flow, Spirit, flow through me as I open up to be an expression of your unfolding peace. Show, Spirit, show to me as I open up to be an expression of your unfolding love.
Well, thank you. You're beautiful. Let's turn now to our love offering. It is time for the sharing of our financial gifts.